welcome to Vantage this week, a show where we recap the highlights of the week gone by. The war in Ukraine has led to some upheaval, political upheaval. Zelensky has reshuffled the country's top leadership, and one prominent name to get the axe is Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister. Meanwhile, in Russia, two journalists are under scrutiny, American scrutiny. The US has accused them of spreading propaganda to influence the upcoming US presidential election. Propaganda is not the only problem that the US faces. It's also dealing with spies on its own soil. A senior official in New York was detained and charged with being a Chinese agent. And as usual, there was chaos in Pakistan. A mall's grand opening turned into grand theft larceny. All this and more lined up. Let's get started. It's a major shakeup in Ukraine, the biggest since the war broke out. President Volodymyr Zelensky is reshaping his core team. Some familiar faces are out and new ones are in. The plan is to replace more than half of the cabinet. And what a time to do it. Just as Russia unleashed a massive missile attack. But what exactly is Zelensky hoping to achieve here? Who has he fired and why now? So far, 7 ministers have resigned. One presidential aide was also fired. This includes Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. Chances are you're familiar with this man. Kuleba has been Zelensky's trusted diplomatic messenger. He's traveled to Europe, to North America, to Latin America, to Africa, even to India and China. His job was to drum up support for Ukraine. Well, not anymore. Kuleba announced his resignation today. So did the Justice Minister, the Environment Minister, the Strategic Industries Minister, and 2 Deputy Prime Ministers. Although it's not game over for all of them, chances are they will get different portfolios. And Zelensky has not really explained why he's doing this. He just gave a vague justification on Tuesday. Listen to what he said.
Autumn will be extremely important for Ukraine. Our state institutions must be organized in a way that ensures Ukraine achieves all the results we need, all of us. To this end, we must strengthen certain areas within the government, and personnel decisions have been prepared. I also anticipate a different emphasis on certain areas of our foreign and domestic policy.
So 50% of the cabinet was replaced, and Zelensky's justification is that the season is changing. What does autumn have to do with politics? Well, after autumn comes winter, and Russia is looking to capitalize on that. They are targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. No energy, no heating. No heating, no morale. That is what Russia is betting on. So yes, Ukraine does need to prepare for the winter, but it's not clear how a cabinet reshuffle will help. Not like ministers are laying gas pipelines. So clearly there is more at play. Possibly domestic politics. You see, Zelensky's core team has been running a tight ship. They have an iron grip over affairs, whether it's foreign policy or military strategy. If you disagree with them, you're out. Consider what happened to the last army chief. He said the war had reached a stalemate, and weeks later he was replaced. The problem here is a lack of accountability. Zelensky has declared martial law in Ukraine, so democracy has basically been paused. The parliamentary elections were supposed to be held last year. The presidential polls were scheduled for this year, but both were postponed. So Zelensky and his party still control everything in Ukraine, which is quite different from other wartime regimes. Just look at Israel. When war broke out, they formed a unity government. Basically, the opposition joined the cabinet, and it is common practice during wars. But Zelensky has not done that. He has accumulated power in his office. Some opposition lawmakers have criticized this. They've been calling for a unity government in Kiev. They say this is a government without ministers. Some US senators have also chimed in. They want Zelensky to hold elections amid the war. Maybe that is why he's shuffling his cabinet. It's not an election, but it is a symbolic change. And the timing is also important. Zelensky is heading to the US later this month. He will present what he calls a victory plan to the US president, Joe Biden. So he'll need a new team by then. But a bigger challenge is the Russian onslaught. Today, Moscow unleashed another attack. The target was the city of Lviv. Reports say 13 missiles and 29 drones were fired today. Some of them hit civilian infrastructure. City officials claimed 7 people were killed in the attack. Among them were 3 children. Lviv is in western Ukraine. It's also close to the Polish border, so Poland scrambled fighter jets to ward off any threat. An even bigger attack happened yesterday. Russia fired 2 ballistic missiles at Poltava. It's a city in central Ukraine. One of them hit a military academy in the city. The other crashed into a hospital. Kiev says more than 50 people, 50 people have been killed, plus more than 200 others have been injured. It's one of the deadliest attacks since the war began. These attacks are putting pressure on Kiev. Zelensky is pleading for air defense systems from allies, basically weapons to shoot down Russian missiles. Meanwhile, Moscow is pushing on. Today, they announced a major decision. Russia is tweaking its nuclear doctrine. And this is very important. A nuclear doctrine tells you when a country will use nuclear weapons, under what circumstances. Russia's current doctrine was set in the year 2020. It has 2 main conditions, either a nuclear attack on Russia or a conventional attack that threatens Russia's existence. These are the 2 scenarios when Russia will use nukes. Both are quite unrealistic. But Moscow is now tweaking that doctrine. They're blaming the West for this change in policy. So things are suddenly speeding up in Ukraine, both on the battlefield and diplomatically. Zelensky and his team have been quite rigid about how to handle this war. Let's see if the new team is any different. America is back to its favorite pastime, and I don't mean baseball, I mean obsessing over Russia. Their latest target is RT, Russia Today, a Kremlin-funded Russian broadcaster. Washington says RT is meddling in the US election. How? By using influencers. Apparently, RT had hired a firm in Tennessee. They paid this firm $10 million. To do what? Create content based on Russian messaging. And here's how it worked. The Tennessee firm contracted a number of right-wing influencers. They were paid to make content on certain topics like migrant gangs or transgender issues or online censorship. These are staple topics for American conservatives. Nearly 2,000 such videos were created and they amassed 16 million views. Now, the obvious question is why? How does all of this help Russia? Listen to what the US Attorney General said.
The subject matter and content of many of the videos published by the company were often consistent with Russia's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core Russian interests, particularly its ongoing war in Ukraine. An internal planning document created by the Kremlin states that as a goal of the campaign is securing Russia's preferred outcome in the election.
So 2 things. 1, Russia wanted to amplify divisions in the US. And 2, Russia has a preferred outcome in the election. And what is that? A Donald Trump victory. We are not saying this, American officials are, that Russia wants Trump to win. They are cracking down heavily on Russia today. 10 people have been sanctioned by Washington. Among them is RT's editor-in-chief. 2 RT staffers have also been indicted, meaning they face criminal charges in the US. But RT has denied these allegations and they're responding in the most RT way. Listen to this. 2016 called and it wants its cliches back. 3 things are certain in life: death, taxes, and RT's interference in the US elections. Sounds funny, right? But there's a bigger issue here. That of information warfare. Russia Today is a state-funded broadcaster, basically a mouthpiece for Moscow. And they rarely hide it. In 2017, RT registered as a foreign agent in the US. Technically, news channels don't have to do that, but RT did, because it was not just a news channel. It was also a political agent, which brings us to the problem. There's a line between journalism and propaganda. There's also a line between propaganda and meddling. Washington says RT crossed all of these lines. But they're not the first or the only ones. Governments have always used media to push their narrative. Consider the United States and the Iraq War. Most US publications supported the war, like the New York Times and the Washington Post. They blindly bought the US government's version of events. Later on, they apologized for it. I'm sure Iraqis would call this propaganda. Same in the Libya war. The New York Times has been accused of favoring an intervention. Well, the US did intervene, and today Libya is a broken country. Such practices are more common among state-funded outlets like Al Jazeera in Qatar. They've been accused of spreading propaganda too during the Arab Spring and during the blockade of Qatar. So this problem is not exactly new. The only difference is Russia today went a step ahead. And frankly, it's harder for non-Western outlets because the standards are different. When a CNN or New York Times pushes the US narrative, it's good journalism. When others do it, it's called propaganda. And I don't mean just government narratives, I mean national interest narratives. Clearly, the Americans have aced this game. They've disguised propaganda as journalism. And all countries need to realize this, to wake up to this, because conflicts are not just fought with fighter jets and bullets, they're fought with information and narratives. If you can't get your narrative out, you will fail. It doesn't matter if your cause is good. And the opposite is also true. Even if your cause is bad, narratives can make it look good. That's what the US did in Iraq. That's what Russia is trying to do in Ukraine. Chances are Moscow will retaliate against the US, possibly against American media outlets. Meanwhile, President Putin is covering his tracks. US officials have accused him of covertly backing Trump. So Putin says he wants Kamala Harris to win.
I've said that our so-to-say favorite was the acting president, Mr. Biden. He's been taken out the race, but he advised all his supporters to support Mrs. Harris. That's what we'll do. We'll support her as well. That's the first thing. Secondly, her laugh is so expressive and infectious. That means that she's doing well.
Is that a joke or more propaganda? Only Putin knows. But either way, expect the media wars to escalate. China too has entered the fray. Their strategy is to throw money at the problem. Some $6.6 billion since 2009. That's the kind of money China has spent to expand its global media footprint. It's an information race. India, unfortunately, is falling behind. And the cost of this could be immense. We say the key is to find a balance to spread India's interests without meddling. Our next story is about two women from two different corners of the world, but both accused of the exact same thing, spying for China. The first suspect is called Linda Sun, 41 years old, a Chinese-born naturalized citizen of the US. She was the deputy chief of staff to the governor of New York. She worked for the US government for 14 years, rose through the ranks and made her way to the top levels of the New York state government. But in July, her house was raided by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And yesterday she was detained along with her husband. Both have been accused of working for Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party. Sun is said to have removed official criticism of China on Xinjiang. It's a province in China, home to the Uyghur Muslim people. China persecutes these people. It has put more than 1 million of them in jails. Sun used to scrub mentions of the Uyghurs. Then there was the Wuhan virus pandemic. Even as New York was under lockdown, Sun ensured that Chinese consular officials had access to New York leaders. She's even accused of adding Chinese officials to private New York government calls. And then there was Taiwan. She declined meetings with Taiwanese dignitaries. She blocked invitations to the governor and then went on to protest against the Taiwanese delegation. Basically, all her moves were meant to benefit Beijing. And she got away with this for years. What was her reward? Beijing apparently showered her with riches, helped her buy luxury mansions, like her $4.1 million New York house, the one that was raided, and an ocean view condominium in Hawaii worth $2.1 million. Then there were sports cars like a 2024 Ferrari Roma. These were rewards for a job well done. But perhaps the most striking rewards were the gourmet ducks. That's right, ducks. Nanjing-style salted ducks made by a Chinese consular official's private chef. They were sent every few months to Sun's parents' house. Those duck deliveries are also part of the investigation. Sun and her husband were produced before a Brooklyn court yesterday. They've been charged with secretly acting as Chinese agents. They've pleaded not guilty.
I think that these charges are disappointing, that they are the product of an overly aggressive investigation.
Excuse me.
And we are looking forward to exercising our right to a speedy trial and addressing these accusations in the forum where it's most appropriate, which is a court of law. Thank you.
Sun's lawyer says that this is an overly aggressive investigation. The trial will resume later this month. So that was the tale of Linda Sun, our first alleged Chinese spy. The second story is even more outlandish. It's about Alice Guo.
On or about 1 o'clock a.m., 4 September, Alice Guo, also known as Guo Huaping, was arrested in Tangerang City, Jakarta, Indonesia. I congratulate all law enforcement personnel who made this apprehension possible.
This was the president of the Philippines. He thanked police officials in Indonesia for capturing a wanted fugitive. Her name is Alice Guo. She's another suspected Chinese spy. In 2022, she became the mayor of a small town in the Philippines, a town called Bamban. After that, there were reports of illegal scam centers. Both locals and foreign nationals were abducted and held at these centers, at these locations. They were forced to scam people online. Earlier this year, this town was raided. The investigations revealed Guo's link to the scam centers. Reports say that these centers were built on land that she partially owned. This caused an uproar. Alice Guo was questioned by the country's Senate. That's when discrepancies started to show up. Guo's birth certificate was registered when she was 17 years old. She only registered to vote in Bamban town in 2021. Just a year before she was elected mayor. She could not tell the Senate where she grew up. She said she did not remember. This raised a lot of eyebrows. The Philippines accused her of being a Chinese spy. They said her fingerprints matched those of another individual, a Chinese national named Guo Huaping. So in the month of July, the Senate ordered her arrest, but by then she had fled the country. She made her way to Indonesia and then onwards to Malaysia and Singapore. It's been a few months, but Alice Guo has finally been caught in Indonesia. She will be extradited to the Philippines. So hopefully we'll find out the truth about her identity soon enough. Now you've heard both the stories, the tales of Linda Sun and Alice Guo. They've captured the public imagination. They may even be convicted. But let's face it, they probably weren't the best agents out there. China most likely has a number of spies all over the world, silently pushing Beijing's agenda. All we can do is ensure thorough background checks and maybe keep an eye on dubious duck deliveries. Now let's turn our attention to Southeast Asia. A clash took place over the weekend, a maritime clash between the Philippines and China in the West Philippine Sea. That's the part of the sea that belongs to the Philippines. Therefore, it's called the West Philippine Sea. But China claims the entire region as its own, and it tries to enforce these fantasies with aggression. On Saturday, this happened again. Multiple Chinese ships ganged up on a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. Then one of the Chinese boats rammed into it. Thrice. Take a look. Sailors on board the Filipino vessel recorded the attack. They say that the Chinese ship deliberately rammed into them. And that's certainly what it looks like. The Filipino ship was damaged. There are now holes in the ship's hull. You can see the aftermath. But despite this visual evidence, China is trying to turn this around. Beijing claims to be the real victim of the clash. They released their own video of the incident taken by someone on board the Chinese vessel. This video shows just one of the 3 ramming incidents. And Beijing is trying to portray it as an aggressive maneuver by the Philippines. Today, a Chinese spokesperson doubled down on this claim.
First of all, the Sabina Shoal is part of China's Nansha Islands. On August 31st, a Philippine Coast Guard vessel had illegally stayed in the waters near Sabina Shoal for a long time. In an unprofessional and dangerous way, it deliberately rammed into a Chinese Coast Guard vessel, defending what is its rightful position. This caused a collision between the vessels from both the Chinese and Filipino sides. It is, therefore, justifiable that China takes necessary measures in accordance with the law, which is legitimate, lawful, and beyond reproach.
You've seen both the videos, both the versions, the Chinese and the Filipino one. I'll let you decide who looks like the aggressor. Meanwhile, let's look at the bigger picture here. This was the fifth clash between China and the Philippines in a month, the fifth clash in 1 month. Chinese ships and planes constantly butt heads with Filipino vessels, hoping to take hold of the disputed region by force. So let's understand the situation a bit better. First, why is this area disputed? Let's show you the map. This is where the Sabina Shoal is located. It's about 230 kilometers away from Palawan, one of the islands that make up the Philippines. Now, according to international maritime law, anything up to 370 kilometers away from the coast falls into a country's exclusive economic zone, EEZ. Anything that's 370 kilometers away from the land border is your EEZ. The Sabina Shoal is 230 kilometers away from the Philippines, so it is well within its territory. Then why does China have ships in the area? Why is it clashing with the Philippines over this island? Well, because it's China. China believes itself to be above international law. It keeps spewing bogus territorial claims based on ancient imperial boundaries using these convenient old maps. Beijing claims almost the entire South China Sea region. It draws this infamous 9-dash line, and it claims everything within this 9-dash line. Obviously, that is bogus. An international tribunal said as much. It ruled against the Chinese claims back in 2016. So the dispute should have been over, but China refused to accept the verdict. It continues to harass countries that should actually control the region. And that is why a dispute still exists. Now let's look at the reason behind all of this. Why does China want this area so badly? Why does it want to control the entire South China Sea region? The simple answer is resources. The entire sea is rich in oil and gas. New deposits keep getting discovered. It should be enough to benefit all the countries in the region, but China wants to hoard all of it. And it's not just oil and gas, you also have fish. The South China Sea region is full of marine life. It's a boon for a nation's food security. But again, China wants to hog it all. It keeps sending its trawlers to exploit the region, even areas in the exclusive economic zones or EEZ of other nations. So China is literally stealing food off Filipino plates. That's one reason why it wants to control the South China Sea, for the resources. The second reason is trade. About $3 trillion worth of trade flows through the region every year. $3 trillion, it's more than the GDP of most countries. And then there's the strategic angle. Remember, Beijing views the South China Sea region as its own, as its mythical, historical territory. So it wants to control the region to the T. China has set up a number of military bases and airstrips all over the sea, which it can use to exert pressure on other nations and counter any challengers. So the region is lucrative and it has military value. No wonder Beijing goes to such lengths to exert control. Let's turn to Canada now, where the headline is Betrayal. That too of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I wish I could call it surprising, but frankly it is not, because Trudeau trusted the wrong person. Canada's Khalistan mascot, Jagmeet Singh. He leads the NDP, or the New Democratic Party in Canada, NDP, and they have decided to dump Trudeau. Let me explain. Canada's parliament has 338 seats. You need 170 seats to get a majority and form a government, 170. But Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party only has 154 seats. So where did the rest come from? Jagmeet's party, NDP. They have 24 lawmakers in parliament, and they agreed to support Justin Trudeau's party, not coalition support, outside support. Trudeau would keep all cabinet positions and ministries, but if a confidence vote was called, Jagmeet would support him. That was the arrangement. In return, Jagmeet got policy help. Trudeau pushed some of Jagmeet's pet projects, for example, Khalistan. Just think of everything that Justin Trudeau did. He cozied up to designated terrorists, publicly accused India of murder, defended separatism as free speech, and gave a safe haven to Khalistanis on the run. Well, congratulations, Prime Minister. It was all for nothing because Jagmeet Singh dumped you anyway. And his excuse? Apparently, Trudeau wasn't brave enough.
Justin Trudeau has proven again and again he will always cave to corporate greed. The Liberals have let people down. They don't deserve another chance. The fact is, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people.
Well, here in India, we've seen a lot of coalition politics. We've seen alliances being built. We've also seen alliances collapsing. So we know a made-up excuse when we hear it. And what you just heard was a classic example. The truth is, Jagmeet Singh is abandoning a sinking ship. He has revealed himself to be an opportunist. He's leaving Trudeau because the Prime Minister is losing. Look at the opinion polls. The opposition Conservatives lead Trudeau's party, and that too by almost 18 points. The chances are Trudeau is on his way out and Jagmeet Singh is jumping overboard while he still can. The question is, what happens to Trudeau's government? Will he be ousted? Well, not automatically. You need a confidence vote to topple the government. Any lawmaker can propose such a vote. All budget bills are also considered as confidence votes. If Justin Trudeau loses any of them, he will be out and elections will have to be held. On paper, polls are slated for October 2025, October next year, but Trudeau may not make it till then. He could be ousted this month or next month or maybe next year. It depends on whether he can get new allies. But Trudeau is downplaying all the coalition concerns. He says he will let others focus on the politics.
Look forward to conversations with Mr. Singh about how we're going to continue to demonstrate that confident countries invest in their citizens, invest in their future, because that's what we're doing. I am not focused on politics. I'll let other parties focus on politics. I'm focused on actually delivering the things that Canadians told me this summer they need.
Now, here's the obvious question. Canada's parliament will convene this month. Why doesn't the opposition just table a no-confidence motion? Well, chances are they will, but it's not guaranteed to succeed. You see, Jagmeet Singh may have scrapped his deal with Justin Trudeau, but he can still prop up the government. And why would he do that? A, because he's not ready for elections. Reports say his party hasn't raised enough funds. And B, to build distance. Jagmeet will want to distance himself from Trudeau's policies, but for that he needs some time. He needs to let the divorce sink in. And the opposition realizes this. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is calling it a stunt.
And now, sellout Singh has pulled a stunt. The sellout Singh stunt today, where he came out and claimed that he was wrong, that the coalition was a bad, costly idea, but he refuses to commit to voting for a carbon tax election.
So things are precarious right now. Trudeau could reach out to other political parties, other opposition parties, like the Bloc Québécois, who have 32 seats. Or he could reach out to Jagmeet again, convince him to not topple the government. But either way, two things are pretty clear. One, Justin Trudeau is now a lame duck leader. He is at the mercy of smaller parties. And two, Jagmeet Singh is running his party to the ground. He took charge of the NDP in 2017. Look at their performance before and after. In 2011, the NDP had 103 seats. 2011, 103 seats. In 2015, they won 44 seats. In 2019, they won 24 seats, and in 2021, 24 seats again. This is Jagmeet Singh's career. He can barely keep his party afloat. And this is the guy who wants to break up India. It certainly promises to be an interesting period in Canadian politics. Maybe a good idea to get a lettuce for Justin Trudeau. Like Liz Truss in Britain, let's see if he can outlive it. Our next story is about Volkswagen, the German automobile giant. Most of you will be familiar with the company or its host of subsidiaries like Audi, Porsche and Skoda. All these brands are part of the Volkswagen Group, making it both a German and European institution. But this grand company is currently in a world of hurt. And yesterday it did the unthinkable. The CEO announced that he wants to close some car plants in Germany. And this is unprecedented. It has never happened before in the group's 87-year-long history. In fact, Volkswagen has not closed a plant since 1988, since it shut a facility in the US state of Pennsylvania. That was in 1988. So what has prompted this turn of events? Why is Volkswagen closing or thinking of closing down its factories, and that too in Germany? Well, it's a combination of factors which have merged into the perfect storm. The biggest reason is the rise of Chinese electric vehicles, EVs. As you know, EVs are everywhere these days. The electric craze started with Tesla, but soon the industry came under Chinese dominance with brands such as BYD, NIO, SAIC Motors and the rest. The Chinese EVs are everywhere these days, and that has hurt Volkswagen in two ways. One was the Chinese market. Before the rise of these EV giants, China used to be Volkswagen's single biggest market. But then BYD and others started growing, and Volkswagen's share of the Chinese market started shrinking. Profits dipped, growth stagnated, Volkswagen's share prices started tanking. It was chaos. But this was just the first blow. The second was the growth of Chinese brands in Europe. The EV craze has hit every part of the world, and Europe is no different. Electric cars and hybrid sales keep growing. They make up 25% of all European car sales. They made up 25% of all European car sales last year. This would have been challenging enough for Volkswagen, having to transition from petrol and diesel to EVs. But then came the Chinese brands. They clawed their way into the European market, and they keep growing, taking away the share of traditional European auto giants like Volkswagen. So it's a double blow. Volkswagen is losing both China and Europe to the Chinese brands because of the new electric vehicle craze. Now, you would think Volkswagen should do better. It should get with the program and start churning out EVs. Well, it did. And that has become another problem for them. Volkswagen and its arsenal of subsidiaries all invested in EVs. It was a tough market, already dominated by early movers like Tesla and the Chinese companies. But the Europeans knew that EVs were the future, so they went ahead, and it has been tough. They cannot produce their cars as cheaply. They have to pay European wages after all. So European EVs are more expensive than their Chinese counterparts. And this is a price-sensitive segment, often subject to price wars between Tesla and the Chinese firms. So the Europeans kept ending up as collateral damage. To counter this, some of these European companies like Volkswagen decided to make in China to bypass the European wage problem. So they invested in Chinese plants and began manufacturing in China. But then came another blow: European tariffs on EVs from China. The EU, the European Union, is putting tariffs up to 38% on EVs made in China. Any cars made in China will face this tax of up to 38%. And this includes cars made by European brands like Volkswagen. So it seems that no matter what they did, they could not win. Now combine all of this with the bigger picture, the state of the European economy. Europe has been struggling for years now. First, there was the Wuhan virus pandemic, then the Russia-Ukraine war. Both have hammered the European economy. Growth has stagnated. Germany, in particular, is in the doldrums. It keeps hovering around a recession. Every month seems worse than the last. And Germany is supposed to be Europe's growth engine. If the engine is busted, how will the economy run? How will people make money? How will they afford cars? So it's no surprise that European car sales are down overall. Volkswagen was already dealing with sluggish demand at home, and now the whole EV debacle. It has been one blow after another, and the German giants are finally throwing in the towel. They want to shut plants at home and lay off workers, something they had promised to not do till at least 2029. But now they want to break that promise because the situation is just that bad. Volkswagen is in a race against time. It has to cut about $11 billion in costs, $11 billion in the next 2 years. That is its grand plan to survive the transition to EVs. So expect more potential closures and layoffs. These are just the first casualties of the rise of the EV age. And staying with Pakistan, let's tell you about what was supposed to be Pakistan's biggest thrift store, the Dream Bazaar in Karachi. It opened around 3 p.m. local time, and within half an hour, the mall was empty. The goods were all gone. Now, you'd imagine the opening was a super hit. But then again, this is Pakistan. The mall was empty because of an out-of-control mob that looted it. They vandalized it, they broke the glasses, beat up the security personnel and took all the goods home. How did Karachi's dream turn into such a nightmare? Our next report tells you.
अबे तो वो है टी-शर्टें चलो आगे चलो यहाँ पे आगे चलो टी-शर्ट चलो
लेकिन क्या हाल किया है
It was supposed to be a grand opening, yet it turned into absolute chaos. This is Dream Bazaar. It's located in the city of Karachi in Pakistan. According to reports, it was established by a Pakistani businessman living abroad. The mall was marketed as Pakistan's first mega thrift store, and the promises were lofty. Apparently, you could buy anything for as less as 50 Pakistani rupees. That's around 18 cents. The opening day was on Friday. The store announced special discounts. There were aggressive marketing campaigns. It was set to be a grand affair. Dream Bazaar opened at around 3 p.m. local time, but by 3:30 p.m. it was completely looted. Thousands gathered outside the mall ahead of the opening. When the gates opened, they rushed in. The crowd swelled every minute. The mall management tried to keep things under control, but soon it was impossible. And things descended into chaos. People looted the entire store. They took whatever they saw. Some carried them out in their arms, while others brought bags to stuff goods and carry them home. Meanwhile, the security there was overwhelmed. The crowd overpowered them. They beat up the security personnel, glasses were shattered, the property was destroyed. Some people even filmed themselves while vandalizing the store. Outside the mall, things came to a standstill. Traffic stopped and people gathered. But where were the police? Well, they were nowhere to be seen. Some allege the police ignored the looters and were beating up bystanders instead. Of course, the incident has since divided Pakistani social media. Some called it a banana republic. Others lamented the lack of rules or ethics. But more importantly, it's a commentary on the country itself and its economy. Take Karachi, for example. It's where the mall is located. Karachi accounts for 25% of Pakistan's GDP. It generates 50% of the country's revenue. Yet, development projects in the city are missing. The government slashed the budget for that. So, what's the government doing about it? Well, it's touting its own record. A few days ago, Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif spoke on the economy. He said the country is moving towards stability. Yet the numbers don't look good. Debt has soared to $254 billion. This comes as Pakistan is anxiously awaiting a $7 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund. Meanwhile, the people of Pakistan are struggling. Inflation is still high, things remain unaffordable, and the angst is palpable. The looting and vandalism in Karachi reflected this. The mall may have started out as a dream project, but Pakistan's Dream Bazaar turned out to be a big nightmare.
Our next story is about a marriage between King Maswati III and Nomsibo Zuma. Maswati is the king of Eswatini. Nomsibo is the daughter of Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa. On paper, it sounds like a political union, two powerful families coming together, but in reality, it's absurd and ridiculous. King Maswati is 56 years old. Nomsibo Zuma is 21. What's worse, she will be his 16th wife, 16th. And she had to dance bare-chested in front of the king to be selected. case you're wondering, we're still in 2024. Maybe time works differently in the kingdom of Eswatini. This is the country we're talking about. Look where it is located, in southern Africa, sandwiched between South Africa and Mozambique. Eswatini is a small kingdom. It has over 1 million people. Until 2018, Eswatini was known as Swaziland. The name has now changed, but everything else remains the same. Eswatini is one of the world's last remaining absolute monarchies, ruled by this man, King Maswati III. He succeeded his father. He was crowned in 1986 at the age of 18. He has total control of the government. Eswatini does have a parliament, but the king wields all the power, and he's quite controversial. King Maswati has an opulent lifestyle. From palaces to private jets, he owns all of it, while the rest of the population lives in poverty. And polygamy is part of the Swazi culture. So the king has 15 wives. He chooses them at the annual Reed Dance, which is a day-long ceremony where young women perform before the royal family, bare-chested, wearing traditional clothes, singing and dancing, and the king chooses his bride from this mix. This is how he chose Nomsibo Zuma, his 16th wife. Eswatini calls it culture and tradition, but it's quite controversial. 40% of the kingdom's population is HIV positive. In 2001, the king started a fight against AIDS. In 2005, he enforced a ban, no copulation with girls below the age of 18. But just days later, the king himself broke the law. He took a 17-year-old girl as his 9th wife. People were enraged. So the king decided to punish himself. Do you know what was the punishment? He gave up 1 cow. Some great sacrifice and justice there. And it's not the only such case. In 2003, he got a new bride, but the mother of the bride said that she'd been kidnapped. Basically, what Eswatini calls culture is a grotesque power dynamic. I mean, look at it. A king in his late 50s selecting from a group of dancing women. What about the woman's agency? Why is she reduced into a spectacle for royal entertainment? This is a king who blends cultural rituals for personal indulgence. His kingdom does not have basic needs, proper healthcare or education, but he's busy accumulating wives and wealth. The Reed dance used to be a cultural rite, marking a girl's transition to womanhood, but now it's a symbol of royal privilege, where women are commodified and their future hangs in the balance of one man's whims. And once they become his brides, their life is dictated by the palace. No freedom, no escape from this cruel cycle. All of this has to change. We are not saying that tradition is not important. It is. But using it to expand a harem of wives is not tradition. It is a shameless expression of power. King Maswati III must confront this reality. Tradition cannot justify exploitation, and tradition too must be in tune with the times. The fact that women still have to parade themselves in front of a king is not only unthinkable, it's a shame on a world that claims that it is moving forward. What was God doing before he created the world? Back in the 4th century, philosopher Augustine of Hippo asked this question, and then he answered it himself. He said, before God created the world, there was no time. There was no before. The question is invalid. When it comes to the universe, you could repeat the same annoying process and ask, what came before the Big Bang? And most astronomers would say nothing. Time, space, matter, they all began with a sudden explosion, what we call the Big Bang. But a new study is challenging this theory. It says there was a secret life before the bang. Our next report tells you more.
The big yarn, the big scam, or the big sham. Ignore us. We're coming up with alternate lingo for the theory that has so far told us how the universe began. We're talking about the Big Bang Theory. That's what astronomers say birthed the universe. They say it all started with a single point about 14 billion years ago. The universe was trapped inside a bubble, just hot, tiny particles mixed with light and energy. All of this thousands of times smaller than a pinhead. It was super cramped, so the bubble was dense and hot. Doesn't sound very healthy. So, like most people in toxic relationships, the universe was in desperate need for space. Within a fraction of a second, it suddenly exploded. This is called the Big Bang, and the universe we know today was born. and it began growing, stretching in all directions. Tiny particles came together to form atoms. Then more atoms came together, and we got stars, planets, asteroids, galaxies, and even black holes. The universe grew at a rapid rate, and it never stopped. Billions of years later, it's still expanding. That's quite the growth spurt. But what if none of this is true? After all, the Big Bang is just a theory. There's no proof. So what if the Big Bang was not the birth of the universe? What if there was life before the Big Bang? This is what a new study says, that our universe may have had a secret life before the Big Bang. According to the study, black holes already existed. They contracted to form the little bubble that eventually exploded. So technically, atoms existed even before the Big Bang. But it's not alone in coming up with the theory. In modern astronomy, many scientists have said something similar. They say the Big Bang was not a birth but a transition phase. They call this theory the Big Crunch. Let's explain. Have you heard of a soufflé? Normally, it's cool and small. But if you heat it up, as you should, it expands. Eventually, the soufflé cools and then it collapses. Now imagine that the soufflé is our universe. The Big Crunch says something similar happens to our universe. It's expanding now, but thanks to gravity, one day everything will begin to contract. It will fall inwards and collapse, much like a fallen soufflé. Now, no one is going to like a collapsing universe. This will spell the doom of everything. Every galaxy, every planet, every ex-boyfriend's t-shirt you still cherish, every comic you hold dear. All of it gone. And the universe will turn into a super hot, super dense bubble awaiting its next Big Bang. So these are the two camps, the Big Bang and the Big Crunch. This is kind of like Team Edward versus Team Jacob, if you know what we mean, but scientists have picked their favorite theory. So far, no one has any proof. But for ordinary souls like us, do you know the best part? It will be billions of years before the soufflé will collapse, if at all.
It's been a tough couple of days for Vadodara, a city in Gujarat. Heavy rains have left most of it flooded, or had left it flooded, and along with the water came new visitors. Crocodiles. You see, Vadodara is home to the Vishwamitri River, a croc-infested water body. When the river flooded, the crocs were swept into the city. At least 25 of them have been rescued. One crocodile was carried away on a scooter. It tells you how bad the Uber situation is. But seriously, the internet is filled with croc memes, many of them courtesy residents of Vadodara. We've seen Bollywood croc memes, scooter croc memes, and dancing croc memes. The situation has improved in the city and across the state. The waters have started receding, but even amid this crisis, residents retain their sense of humor.
Bruh. Bruh.
Rame belalang kupu-kupu. Taprak biar rame kalau malam minum cucu. Hore!
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree. One tree for humanity. One tree for Mother Earth. One tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On the show today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can you expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
We'll start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. For the first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.